6 is my last day at Clean Water Services, and I've learned that minor facts can be skewed with sensationalism and conjecture to create a false picture about a public servant. One of my guiding principles in life is that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of myself. I'm hopeful that my decision creates a space for unity to move forward. There are many great days ahead for Clean Water Services, the board, and all of its community members in this region. For more than 40 years, I have worked in service to water and its life it supports as an Oregonian. 14 years at Clean Water Services, nearly half has been as CEO, and it's truly been the highlight of my career as an engineer and as a water leader here in Oregon, nationally and globally. Water is truly a gift from Mother Nature, and it must be handled with care and is meant to be used and reused in this ever-ending cycle. Clean Water Services makes that happen here in our region by producing reused water as well as recovering energy and materials for fertilizer in our struvite and Clean Water Grow and biosolids. I can't wait to see what Clean Water Services accomplishes together well into the future, and also to consider the care of our most vulnerable communities here in Washington County. It has been an honor to serve this watershed, this workforce, and this region. So thank you.
Thank you, Diane, and I'm certain that I speak for the board when I say we are grateful for your service to our community, to our customers, and to the Tualatin River and the backbone that it is to our watershed here. So thank you. With that, I'd like to move on to election of officers for today. Are there any volunteers? Let's start there, and also with nominations.
Come on, CWS members. Otherwise, I'll nominate you, Andy. You're sitting right next to me. Go for it. Madam Vice Chair, I nominate Andy to be the chair.
Thank you. I would also like to nominate Terry Song for budget chair, as Andy, with all due respect, because of his experience in that role. Are there any other nominations?
Second.
So which one are you seconding?
The nomination for Andy Song.
Okay.
Parent Song. Sorry.
Do we have a second for?
I think that's fine, right?
Yeah, so we have two motions going at the same time, but we have a second on Mr. Song, so perhaps you should vote on that first.
Yeah, we can. Are you okay with that? Yeah.
Okay. I didn't hear the.
He's fine.
Terry's more than qualified to be the chair.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Director Fye, for your nomination, and thank you for deferring to Mr. Song.
Yeah.
So Nafisa,
I withdraw the motion to nominate Andy.
thank you.
Yeah, I read your mind. Where you going?
Thank you. We have a second. Let's please take a vote. Clerk Moss?
Certainly. Director Willie?
Yes.
Director Schneider?
Yes.
Al Jesse?
Yes.
Chair Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Haugen?
Yes.
Director Fye?
Aye.
Director Guthamurthy?
All right.
Director Song? Okay. And Vice Chair Treese?
Yes.
All right. The motion passes, Madam Chair, 8-0 to 1.
Yes. Thank you very much, and I will turn this meeting over to you, Mr. Song.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Next up, we have...
Mike.
You need your mic.
Oh, yes. Members, if you key your mic where you see the green light, you will be on there.
Next up, we have Budget Excellence and Planning from Kathy Leader.
Thank you, Chair Song. I'm Kathy Leader, Chief Financial Officer for Clean Water Services and Budget Officer. This meeting today is being held in accordance with Oregon budget law. The committee will today receive the budget message from the district, hear public comment, and deliberate on that budget. This meeting will be continued to May 23rd for a second meeting where the committee will have an opportunity to hear public comment, deliberate, and will take final action on approval of a district budget for 2026. This approved budget then will go forward to the board at a public hearing once again on June 17th, where public comment can be made and a final budget will be adopted for the district for 2026. With that, I'm turning it over to Diane Taniguchi-Dennis for the proceedings.
I wanted to start by highlighting the incredible work that CFO Kathy Leader and her team has led to financial excellence with the awards from the Government Finance Awards Association of the United States and Canada. This is an amazing long history where they have received the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the 37th consecutive year, and special recognition for strategic planning for the past 2 years, and the Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for also a 37th consecutive year. So thank you to Kathy and her team. It's been amazing work. So this is one of our orienting slides where we talk about how we go from planning into the Budget Committee review and recommendations, and then ultimately to the board adoption on June 17th. So today, where the red circle is, we're at our Budget Committee meeting. At May 9th, there'll be another Budget Committee meeting on May 23rd. So the foundational documents is what Clean Water Services bases its planning for both operations and maintenance, as well as for capital improvements. So the East Basin Master Plan has been completed. CWAC and ultimately the board will be reviewing and adopting the West Basin Master Plan. There's been a community engagement with our partner cities to do this long-range planning. The team is working still on their asset renewal plan, and all of this turns into the 5-year CIP. And ultimately impacts cost of service, the long-range financial planning, and our performance excellence roadmaps really defines the work that the team is planning to do, not only in this next year, but future years as well. Ultimately, on June 17th, you'll be adopting an approved budget, the 5-year CIP, the rates and charges, and ultimately the pay plan. So there's a lot of work that goes on between now and June 17th. We're going to focus on restoring public trust. We're focused on fiscal frugality, and this team will do a really great job with that. So we can demonstrate careful management of the financial resources and with a drive and a gusto to reduce and manage expenditures. So they're prioritizing efficiency, cost control, and really extending the value for our ratepayers by optimizing operations and transparently showing what CWS does to accomplish this. We have strong department and program oversight of their budgets and expenditures, and they want to achieve more with less to make the most of available resources. So we're increasing we're finding the need to increase the understanding of what Clean Water Services provides and our joint utility bills, and really consider developing a long-term ratepayer assistance program. So within the budget, we have several slides, but it's really to highlight it for the Budget Committee, the discussion on increasing transparency and the actions that are being taken. We provided more information to discuss more transparency in travel and training. You have that in all of your documents. Also to increase transparency on the meals and refreshments. It was also provided for the Budget Committee in the documents. And we provided itemized things, information like this for the Budget Committee. And also the discussion of the additional accountability and transparency actions for the organization. So what I'm going to shift to is really focusing on the business climate and the strategy focus for the board and for CWAC to consider. It's about maintaining the capability to respond to our residential, commercial, and industrial development in the region. And we really need to continue to maintain this stable foundation by planning for infrastructure needs and sequencing of capital investments that you find in the CIP, and hi, Elaine, and prioritizing efficiency and cost control measures as part of the continual improvement in the Goal Share program. We also outlined the types of sponsorships that the district supports within your documents. So in rebuilding public trust, it's about increasing our internal fiscal controls and financial reporting to increase accountability and transparency. And Kathy and her team are ready for that, so we can provide additional board oversights, really increasing communication and public outreach, making sure we have proactive management of all expenditures to ensure fiscal frugality through the lens of our customers and partners, and really closely managing those expenditures that are impacted by inflationary costs. So the question is often asked, who receives services from Clean Water Services? So there's regional-only services that we provide to Beaverton, Cornelius, Forest Grove, Hillsborough, Sherwood, Tigard, and Tualatin. And those regional services, and we do provide local services to the unincorporated areas of Washington County, as well as to the cities of Banks, Durham, Gaston, King City, and North Plains. And we provide the industrial services for all our industrial customers in the service area with agreed upon charges, and some of the right-of-way fees go to some of the cities that charge them. So what are regional services? So they're provided to all customers in the service area. It's about constructing, operating, and maintaining the treatment plants, the sewage pump stations, and the pressure lines. We design and build and maintain sewer lines that are 24 inches and larger. We have compliance reporting and the oversight for the entire region, and it's called a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. We call it the NPDES permit, and it includes a separate stormwater system permit, which we fondly call the MS4. But it's about also maintaining the minimum stream flows in the Tuolumne River, and it's about surface area restoration and enhancing stream corridors as part of our thermal compliance requirements. So what are local services? So these are the services the city provides, and these are also the services that Clean Water Services provides for the unincorporated areas and for the cities that we have an IGA with. So the services are really to support the operating and maintenance of the local collection system. So it's the system that goes from your house until it goes to the really big trunk line that carries the sewage to the wastewater treatment plants. So it's designing, building, maintaining, repairing sewer lines that are 21 inches and smaller. And it's about cleaning and inspecting the sewer pipes so we can control anything called sanitary sewer flows, sewer overflows, which causes potentially raw sewage to come out of the sewer system. It's about designing, building, and maintaining and repairing the local stormwater facilities. So we have street sweeping, maintaining the water quality facilities, as well as cleaning catch basins and water quality manholes. And you often see the Clean Water Services trucks within the region. There needs to be a focus on regulatory compliance and those strategies. I can't believe it, we're nearly midway through the 5-year cycle of the current permit that was effective of January 1st, 2023. So it increased monitoring and compliance standards. It increased standards on air emissions that impacted our ability to operate the Rock Creek cogeneration equipment. It increased the need for chemicals and temperature changes. So the long-term strategy in the permit, so it's not only about looking at what we need to deliver in this next 5 years, but it's the 5 years after that and the 5 years after that. So it's really focusing on a detailed plan for the next permit with adaptation strategies to address the impacts of climate change. There's increased engagement with our partner cities to plan for the requirements of the next permit because it impacts our partners with their local systems. The people at Clean Water Services is what makes things happen. So it's important to have a people strategy. So a need for continued employee engagement and learning so that we can remain competitive to recruit and retain talent. We need to complete the pay equity analysis and implement a classification and comp system study findings for non-representative employees and complete that study. And that we're going to begin focusing on the collective bargaining agreement that needs to be renewed. It's really about continuing to cultivate the amazing Clean Water Services culture that can make the best use of our resources to foster their creativity, their innovation, and also continual improvement. And it's to develop an organizational succession plan with the changes in our workforces, because we're a lean organization and we need to really focus on those, the critical plan. It's about providing office and building space to meet our current and future needs. The people strategy focus is about providing those spaces to meet the current needs for not only our employees, but for our customers and business operations. We have projects in the construction phase, which is what's fondly called the Ripple Building, and it will create the lab that we need for today and the future, because the existing lab is simply worn out and the infrastructure has failed. We have other projects in design phases, the Clean Water Central Building, which will have some tenant improvements, and people have been moving in staged groups, and then also the Springer Building for our field operations and construction group. So you'll hear more details about these projects in capital planning. And there was also last night, I believe Kathy sent a occupied buildings report for all of you to take a look at with more details. You know, a startling fact has been the change in generations. We've been talking about this for quite a while. And our employee tenure, you can see in the blue bar, the highest number of employees have been here for less than 5 years. And then you can see how it's declining for those that have been 26 years plus. And we're really trying to honor those long-term employees because of the knowledge transfer that's just so important as it moves through the tenure of employees. So this is a little complicated chart, but we're managing and watching just the movement through the organization. So the dark green line is really where we are today. And you can see how we're fluctuating and reducing the number of baby boomers. Certainly the Gen X's are the largest group, along with the millennials. But it's always important to think about even the march of the Gen Xers towards retirement is coming. So it's a people strategy that really needs to be looking at this moving forward. So the staffing levels at Clean Water Services from 2021 at 371 all the way to where we are today at 444. And it's important to note that Clean Water Services holds about a 10% vacancy rate. It allows us to really assess when people leave or retire. We can look at the position and then determine where to efficiently invest next. Strategic planning, the district has been working on this. We've been focused at the grassroots level, which is what is the work that the departments and programs are currently providing. So we understand what our core service levels are, and also those things that they're doing for improvement and also for innovation. And it's really evaluating the business process maturity throughout the organization and also the links to improvements through the Goal Share program. So I'm hoping the team will continue to focus on building on the strategic planning process and the teams, each person at Clean Water Services can see themselves in their roadmaps, and they know what other groups are doing so they can collaborate with each other. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
Thank you, Diane. Ramesh, you got a question?
Well, I can always ask questions, but I was trying to see what's the process for handling questions. So a couple of trivial questions just to make Jason happy. So you said on your file 8, on your regional services, out of curiosity, what is the number of ratepayers that CWS bills every month?
Ooh, this is coming. You're
Oh, is it right?
Yeah,
Oh,
you're
fantastic.
foreshadowing a great question. Yes.
I told you it's a trivial question.
No, it's important. Yeah.
The other one was on your employee tenure. I think I had brought it up in one of our monthly meetings. It's a good thing, though, the graph that you have where you have the younger employees graduating into their senior positions and so on. But you don't have to give me a detailed answer, but I hope you have some kind of a bench, a succession plan so that the organization grows with the employees rather than having to fill them at the middle and the senior levels.
That's really important, and it's work that Clean Water Services needs to do, because we have critical positions that when there's a loss, it's a pretty big loss. So I really appreciate that. But that is something Clean Water Services needs to accomplish.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Done with my quota.
Great, thank you. Okay, this time we'll announce that Elaine Stewart, a member of CWAC, has joined the meeting as a member of our budget committee. Elaine, like to say anything? Good morning. Okay, next up, we have. Thank you, Terry. Oh, you're welcome. Overview of CWS financials from Kathy Leader.
Thank you, Terry. Chair Terry Song. I'm going to start out with a visual here of the proposed budget for fiscal year 26. This slide shows that for current revenue, we're budgeting $247.9 million. That includes service fees, system development charges, miscellaneous fees, and non-rate revenue in that category collected in the current year. Those are being used to fund $151.2 million in operating costs, including labor and materials and services, $147.1 million in capital investments in infrastructure, and $19.6 million in debt service for principal and interest payments. If you were following along on the paper copy of the presentation, I apologize, but the slide that shows up there is expenditure, not revenue. So if you wanted to look at revenue on your paper copy, please turn to page 18 in the paper slide deck, just so you're aware. Service charges are the single largest revenue source for the district. They're budgeted at $197.1 million for fiscal year 26. That's 80% of the current revenues. Growth in this revenue over time reflects adopted rate increases and customer growth, or new connections to the system. The second largest revenue source is system development charges, budgeted at $24.4 million, or 10% of the current revenues. These are fees assessed on new customers connecting to the system to share in the cost related to existing and new capacity system and performance improvements. These revenues are dedicated to capital projects and debt service payments in the budget before you. Other revenue sources include investment income budgeted at $18.5 million, Build America bond subsidies budgeted $1 million, and miscellaneous fees of $6.8 million. These miscellaneous fees include revenues such as miscellaneous fees themselves, grants, contributions from developers, and for construction projects. Now, if you're following along your packet, you will then go back to page 14 in that paper copy. And here, this is the 10-year average increase in combined sanitary sewer and stormwater management rates is equal to about 3.5% over that 10-year period. This is in line with inflation when you look at the CIP over the same time period, CPIW at 3.3%. This trending reflects the district's adopted policy of reasonable rates increases on a regular or annual basis to promote predictability for the customer and revenue stability for the district. As you can see in the graph, there's a pretty big dip in 21. The district provided rate relief in 21 in response to the pandemic. The deferral of this planned, the rate increase, we had anticipated it having a impact on future rates plan, but the management took initiatives to, as with this process, to sequence and prioritize their labor expenditures and their capital investments to help lessen the impact of that rate reduction, and then lessen the impact to the ratepayer in the rate they would be charged. And at the same time, we also provided during that time period reporting to the board so they could see how we were operating and what we're meeting our targets. And we also then are making sure that over time with our forecast that we are keeping our financial metrics in line so that we are able to go out in the bond market in the future at good interest, with a good rating of AAA and good interest costs. Next slide. So this slide is showing the combined sanitary sewer and surface water management rate charged for all customers by the district. The district bills directly. And there you see the very first column. Our proposed rate is $67.65 per month. This includes both the regional and the local rate for the district. We're showing this with other comparables in the region of the rates that they charge. And it should be noted that our rate is competitive when you consider the level of treatment that we do in our facilities. I did want to add there is one additional rate that when we put it into the adopted document we want to show, and that's Clackamas Water Environmental Services. It dropped off of the chart at some point, but wanted to note that they are at $63.95, so they actually will show up as one of the lowest rates in the region, and they have an anticipated rate increase in the next year, 2%. So we will be adding that to the chart. We also include in that chart then the planned rate increases for each of the jurisdictions in this next year for reference. Yeah.
So the rate that I see there for us at 67.65, is that our current rate or is that our proposed?
That is the proposed rate for 26.
Okay, thank you.
And that's the proposed rate for the other jurisdictions also for 26 with their planned rate increase. So this slide shows the combined sanitary sewer and stormwater management rate charged by jurisdictions over the service area, and this is in fiscal year 25 for comparability. So these are the others that bill within our service area. Beginning in 2009, Clean Water Services established a regional rate for services benefiting the entire region and a separate local rate for the unincorporated Washington County and small cities that we serve. The other cities here you see like Beaverton, Cornelius, Forest Grove, Hillsborough, Sherwood, Tigard, and Tualatin. They each develop their own local rates to cover their local services. Some do also include road charges. So the dark blue is the regional, and the light blue is the local charge. And as you can see from the green line is showing you number of accounts billed. So you can see that there is a relationship between when larger number of accounts billed, lower the rate. And that really shows the ability to maintain lower rates for local service areas when the size of the customer base can be spread, so efficiencies over the customer base. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, thank you, Pam. I can't help but notice that Cornelius has the highest combined rate, and it's got a pretty small population and doesn't strike me as a particularly wealthy town. So are there any ways that Clean Water or the board could help, reduce pressure on lower income people in some of these towns?
It's definitely an area that we will be looking at as we offer the services across our region for customer assistance programs. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it really does reflect then the size of their customer base. They spread their local costs across. Mm-hmm. And this speaks to Ramesh's question on number of customers billed across our region. And just so you're aware, these are 2003 numbers. We are in the process. That was the last time we gathered information from all of the cities. We are in the process of pulling that information once again because we are going to be doing a development of new rates based on our cost of service study here soon. So we'll be pulling that together. As shown here, Clean Water Services bills for just under 61,320 customers in urban unincorporated Washington County and 13,180 in the cities of Banks, Durham, Gaston, King City, and North Plains, for a total of 74,500 customers, which is approximately 41% of that full customer base of 179,776. And the 7 incorporated cities have smaller customer base to spread costs over and have increased their local rates to meet their individual local operating needs, and that includes like right-of-way fees for the cities.
Do you have something that shows the growth of number of buildings over time?
I don't, but we will know that when we pull the new EDU information from the cities. It will be good to see. When we do track EDU in our ACFR and trending, and growth over time has been about 1.5% over time. But yeah, it will be interesting to see new stats on EDU.
I'd expect that to be used heavily in some of your CIP and those kind of budgeting, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely, yeah, and in rate development too, definitely. So this slide demonstrates the district's commitment to rate stabilization. The blue line represents annual rate increases adopted by Clean Water Services as compared to other local water utilities over the past 10 years. So here we're showing 3 cities that have had a significant capital project. Beaverton, Hillsborough, and Tualatin Valley Water District are in the process of pulling water as a new water source for the future from the Willamette. It's a huge project, and in doing that, they've needed to increase rates to cover the cost of the project.
Just so I want to be clear here, we're talking about comparison of the other 3 entities are providing drinking water.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
I think that's important context for this slide as well.
I agree. Yeah. The main focus we have on it was just the impacts when you have large capital investment. Yeah. The district does have large capital investments planned into the future, and so we've built reserves over time to help stabilize the rates and avoid spikes in rates to meet these capital needs.
We learned our customers see the water impact as well as the sewer impact. And Chair Harrington asked us to look at the bills so we can show customers how to read their bills, and I think that's a really great initiative. So the team's working on that. But it's the combination of both, and that creates the perception within the community. Thank you.
If I might go back, Chair Song, to a prior slide. I think that rate stabilization slide, the number of account slides, but going back to the combined rate by jurisdiction, thank you. Here, you're saying combined rate, and so the local combined rate is both, this is the question, is it sewer and drinking water, or is it just sewer?
Sewer and stormwater.
Sewer and stormwater. So this doesn't have their drinking water rate on top of that. So when you were talking about rate stabilization on slide 32, is that just sewer and stormwater, or does that also include drinking water?
So the comparison here is the blue line, CWS, is sewer and stormwater, and the other communities are just their water rate.
Yep. So I just wanted to clarify that as well. So also noticing that in the slide before this, slide 31, the contract cities, Banks, Durham, Gaston, King City, and North Plains, they're all pretty small too.
Yes.
Like Cornelius is a small city, but the difference is because of the scale of efficiencies those cities are getting a much lower rate combined than Cornelia's customers are because of the inclusion with the UUA territory. So that's another factor, Director Stewart, Budget Director Stewart, that goes into this.
Thank you.
If I have it right.
No, thank you.
Every
Perfect.
year I try to verify my knowledge.
Perfect. That is a great, clarification. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I got it then. Thank you.
Okay. So the proposed fiscal year 26 budget includes a 4% rate increase for service fees. The average household billed by CWS will pay $2.65 more per month. The 4% increase is to the regional rates for sewer and surface water management that are billed to all customers in our region. 4% increase in the local sanitary sewer and surface water management rate are billed to all customers in the urban unincorporated areas and the direct service cities, the ones that we contract with. Proposed rate increases are planned to meet inflationary and water quality needs. Our goal has been over time annual predictable rate increases and not spiking rates to the customer. I should note too that we are in the process of finalizing our cost of service study, and we then will be doing an update to rates. So this will all be brought forward to the board and to the cities as we talk about our forecast and rate adjustments going forward. System development charges are proposed to increase based on the published engineering news record construction cost index as of March 2025, and it's at 1.9%. That's resulted in center system development charge increase of $130 to $7,139 per equivalent dwelling unit for new connections to our system. The stormwater management system development charge will increase by $13 to $691 per equivalent service unit in proposed budget.
What's the equivalent, that's just one household, or what's the equivalent dwelling?
Yeah, so one residential property is one EDU, one equivalent dwelling unit. And you utilize that then when you're going in, you're calculating connections for commercial based on their number of fixtures and taking them and converting them to an equivalent dwelling unit. So one times when, at 1, 2, 3, however many equivalent dwellings they have, times the rate.
Apartment complexes versus single homes kind
Well,
of.
they'll have, then they will have definitely a different calculation of equivalent dwelling unit based on their number of, fixtures and.
Thank you. See, I'm still learning. So.
No, yeah.
Am I on? There we go. For the SDCs, when your cost of services analysis is done, is this one of the areas you're going to be circling back to see if the SDCs are capturing the cost of putting that infrastructure in place?
Yes, yeah, so our next step after the rates is as we complete the West Basin Master Plan, get it adopted, and then we will have the East and the West Basin plans completed, and then we will be working with our development services group and engineering in updates to our SDCs based on our anticipated growth. Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question related to SDCs from my submitted written questions? And so the budget document articulated that you compare the SDC activity at least annually, or that's the impression I got here. We've been getting information from our Washington County building services folks that SDC activity has been falling off in this current fiscal year, as most recently with Q3 information.
Okay.
And I'm wondering do you see that in the permit trend as well?
Joe, Gall's going to cover that.
Is that coming?
Yeah,
Great.
and it's interesting. What's going on in the cities is actually propelling the increase in SDCs that Clean Water Services sees.
Well, certainly because of the UGB expansion.
Yeah, yeah. So Joe's going to cover that with Damon. Thank you.
Thank you. I tried to go through the posted agenda last night and figure out what pages and slides, but I had trouble figuring that out, so that's why I thought I'd ask here. Thank you.
So this slide is giving you actuals for total expenditures from 2017 to 2024, and our revised budget for 25, which is our adopted budget with any board-approved transfers of contingency. So it's our revised budget at this point in time for 25, and our proposed budget before you for 26. For total expenditures, we're indicating departmental expenditures. That includes labor and materials and services. We have the light, that's the dark blue. The light blue is debt service flowing through there. The green is capital projects. And the other outlays, that includes utility bad debt expense, franchise fees collected and remitted to cities, pass-through of local industrial flow and right-of-way fees to cities, and planned mid-year personnel adjustments. That these would be, they're appropriated, but in order to spend them, the board will need to approve to move them up into a department for payment. In 2019, you might note that there was a big uptick in capital expenditures. One of the key projects that happened during that period was the Upper Tualatin Interceptor that was at that point in time, $26.3 million cost in that year. So we had some significant capital costs in 2019. Also, other outlay kind of took a bump too in that year. We did a one-time payment of $15 million to establish a new aside account with the Oregon Public Employees Retirement System to cover the unfunded pension liability and stabilize future PERS employer rates. In 2020, we also had a bump in capital programs, really a lot of expansion at Durham with the secondary expansion, Rock Creek's admin remodel, and the continuation of Upper Tualatin Interceptors during that year. In 2022, you see a bump there and other outlay too. That was a $39.5 million payment to the bond trustee to refund the Series 2011B bonds. The refunding related to net present value savings of over $6 million for the district. And as you can see, when you're looking at 25 and 26, capital investments are key drivers for us in these next couple years. And Rick Shanley will be talking a little bit about our capital CIP planning program. Expenditure trends. So, and if you're looking on the paper, I apologize, but you are then moving back to page 14 in the book as we look at expenditures. The proposed fiscal year 26 budget includes current expenditures of $317.9 million in total. Departmental expenses, including personal services and material services, total $139.9 million, or 44% increase over the prior year. Capital investment costs total $147.1 million, or 46% of the budget. Debt principal and interest account for 19.6 million, or 6% of the budget. And I should note that the increase in this year, our budget includes a $75 million, a planned $75 million issuance. We do a 10-year financial forecast, and we plan out rate increases looking at capital planning, and we identify years when we have significant capital projects that are occurring that it would benefit us to look at the bond market. However, with the reserves we have the ability to then, if the market isn't good, cash fund those projects as we look out to the future for a better market to enter into. This year, we're going to, once again, we have some big projects out there, on the list. And we're going to look at the issuance, but at the same time, if we do that issuance, we are also going to look at refunding our Build America bonds, or 2010 Build America bonds, really just to mitigate against any future loss we might see from the federal government program itself. Other fund outlays of 11.3 million, or 4% of the budget expenditures, include, utility bad debt expenses that I mentioned, franchise fees collected and remitted to the cities, pass-through of right-of-way and local rates to the cities with industrial customers within our city limits, and that mid-year personnel adjustment. Those category of appropriation that would need to be approved for expenditure in the category. So then, going then back into your packet, if you're following by paper, you're on page 19 for total expenditures. The proposed budget reflects the total expenditures of $317.9 million. That's an increase of $53.5 million, or 20% compared to the prior year. And itemizing that increase up, obviously, as we mentioned, the largest significant driver of this budget is infrastructure build. $42.7 million increase in capital improvement plan in this next year. $7.5 million in operating, $2.4 million in the debt service. That increase really relates to the payment of principal and on the new issuance that we would do if we issued that.
So before you move off this slide, I have a question.
Yeah.
And maybe it will come in later slides. I've been really trying to get my head around, you've got the 5-year planning and also the 10-year comparators.
Yes.
And the reason, so I read the full CIP this year because what I'm really trying to grasp is related to the previous slide. You demonstrate on the one back, sorry, total annual expenditures. Here I can see, by just focusing on the green, the trend on capital projects. But I can see through the CIP this plan for capital projects over 5 years. I find myself wanting to see that a forecast going out 5 years related to capital, because I think it really tells the story of how fiscally the agency continues to be prudent and lean, and utilization of the financial tools, which you're an expert on and I rely on, but I'm having difficulty myself, and this is where I yearn for another graph, I think, because from this, I can see, even if you held department expenditures steady or with a CPI growth, for example, that there's a big green bar here.
Yeah.
This is 5 years or 4 more years of a big green bar.
Yeah.
But I have to make it up in my mind versus see it.
Yeah. I do have a slide further down that shows you that forecast.
Okay,
And we
great.
can definitely add years if we want. But the further you get out, the more estimate, and it really
You'll
is.
probably see the light bulb go off then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I really want to uplift the work that Erin Lowry and Tanya and Jean do. They do that forecast, and I think it would be great that we begin showcasing that work. And thank you, Chair.
Yeah, that final item on the total proposed expenditures is an increase of $798,900 in other fund outlay, and a large portion of that is bond issuance costs. So if we didn't do the issuance, we wouldn't be spending that in that year. Proposed operating budget. The proposed operating budget is, as we mentioned, was $139.8 million, an increase of $7.5 million or 5.7% over the prior year. Personal services are anticipated, or will be increased by $6.5 million or 7.9%. There's the key areas that are impacting the cost of labor, the 4 new positions that are included in this proposed budget. It also reflects the full year of the 12 positions added in 2024, now being fully costed in a year. We also, one of the more significant increases in our budget is the PERS, employer rate. That changed this fiscal year, and it's going to have about a $3 million impact on cost for us.
Chair, I have a question here. On this, it's on this slide, when I think about the fact that we have been relatively prudent in FTE expansion, as we bring on these capital projects, what is the influence of those capital projects on the personnel level?
Yeah, that's definitely an area we want to track. It's something in particular for GFOA budget award that they like you, when, as you're adding capital projects, identifying the increase and impact on operating. And we definitely we want to manage that and do a better job of tracking.
Okay, thank you. And I would expect that as we forecast those
Yes.
capital investments, that as per GFOA, we're tying that to what our increased operating costs.
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. And that's what they really want to see in that budget document is, as you're adding these capital items, the added operating costs, whether it be utility or labor, and how that's flowing back into your budget. And that's an area where we're working to refine.
Thank you.
And then finally on, along with the PERS, just cost of living adjustments and pay for performance and other like medical premium benefits all impact the cost of labor year over year.
Can you provide a little bit more insight on I've seen it referenced in a couple different places, the performance-based pay concept. I mean, I understand the concept. I would say in the public sector, that's not necessarily a common practice. So I would like to understand a little bit more about, what roles are in that space. What is the general structure? I'm not looking for like a ton of detail, but I just want to understand, since that's unusual or somewhat unusual in the public sector, what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, and Diana can add to if you like. So annually, our employees receive a employee evaluation, and in there they have their key competencies, and they're reviewed, and HR has set up a criteria for this pay for performance where you land in a spectrum of like 0, no increase for performance, to 3%. You're excellent. And they provided criteria in each of the categories of percentage of increase in wage to reflect the performance of the employee. So it really is based on the accomplishments and the employee and their, meeting their competencies, but also then their excellence in providing service.
Okay, so it's the way you have that listed, then it's sort of an annual increase might be a COLA of some sort, and then some varying amount of increase based on performance.
So unlike
And is that true of all employees or non-represented employees, or?
That is true for all employees.
Okay.
And so like a step system would normally do like 5%, and you top out, and then all you would get is COLA. Ours allows for a COLA each year based on the CPIW, and then pay for performance is 0 to 3% added to that COLA.
Okay, and so that's in the bargaining unit contracts? Interesting.
Yeah, the Teamsters were really supportive of this when the previous general manager set this program up. It's not only about performance, it's also about behavior. So those are part of the components. So they agreed to not have a step system with this ability to have a pay for performance. There is interest still to go maybe potentially relook at a step system, but there is a benefit. So with their increase, what happens is they have a wage band. So the COLA keeps them where they are to market, and then the 3% moves them through the scale till they hit the top. So when the employees hit the award point, they still have the ability to receive a performance award from 0 to 3. And it's been pretty amazing for Clean Water Services, so thank you.
Thank you.
It's usually a good motivation also for the day-to-day. I like that. But I like that you have a 0 to 3% band rather than we'll double your pay grade in 1 year.
Can I ask a question? Chair, sorry. So in this proposed operating budget and based on the makeup chart that you've provided to us, you have 52 unfilled positions, and you're adding 4. So do you anticipate filling all 56 of those positions?
No, I mean, usually, there's always turnover and, vacancies. I think right now HR, their goal is 90%, with a 10% vacancy that they've been trending at. So yeah, there are always vacancies.
Yeah, so a 10% vacancy would be 49 people. So yeah, I just wondered how that plays into our budget. I'll get to that later,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I mean, we like to budget for those.
Yeah.
Obviously, at Washington County, we've eliminated those, so, due to budget constraints, so I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Okay. So on the materials and services side, increase of 996,000, really in line with inflation, 2% increase, but we do have some areas where we did see some increases that really were the drivers of any increases in that budget. One is the software licensing costs that increased by 524,900, or 16.9%. This is an increase in licensed users, annual license cost increases, and new software being implemented by the district. Also, other government services, that increased by 497,200, or 11%. And the main driver on that was an increase in the joint billing charges with Tualatin Valley Water District. It's an estimate based on a new IGA we're going to be entering into effective July 1 with them as they provide us billing service. And it also includes a true-up of costs to actuals for the Lake Oswego agreement. This report, we include those costs in the regional utility services administration.
Sorry, can I ask a clarifying question on this? The joint billing with TVWD, is that just for the UUA customers?
Yes, in the cities that we contract with, yes.
Thank you.
And then finally, energy costs, an increase of 346,800, or 22%. It's a combined rate. This really relates to meeting regulatory requirements and just increased cost in utility rates. Oh, and the chair left. So the chair left, just as we show what you had been talking about with regards to showing the impacts of capital program on our 5 and 10 year forecast.
I'll be sure to put that slide up.
Okay. So the district does maintain a 10-year financial forecast to plan for needed rate increases, impacts of operating capital spending, and identify the need for debt issuance. So the blue line there you see is the current revenue by year. The dark blue. And this includes for the 26, the 4% increase per year, and 1% for growth, so a 5% factor each year in growth of revenue. The light blue represents the M&S. We trajectory out at 7% for labor and 5% for M&S. As we do our forecast, though, we recognize that we don't spend all of our money in that year. And, we appropriate, but we have vacancies. We have, capital spend that doesn't happen. So we adjusted based on historical trending to 90%. So we did 90% of both capital and M&S spending in those trajectory out.
Kathleen?
Yeah.
The use of reserves to construct the planned capital projects, does that include the issuance of a bond, or is this absent?
No, this includes the issuance of debt
Okay.
in 26 as planned. So then also it's mapping out our capital program from our CIP document, and debt based on that new issuance in 26. And then another just trended out. So that's the bar graph. The blue line is revenue. So that's revenue trending at 4% over that time period. And the black line you see up above, that is fund balance and reserves. And you see it uptick in 26, and that's really when we issue that debt. So there's an increase in revenue and reserves related to that. And then that hyphenated black line going down is showing based on operations and capital spend, that reduction in reserves as we build out that capital program, because it's a significant program with roughly $100 million per year in the next 3 years. So it has an impact.
The vast majority of the ending fund balance in there is all capital. Like that's not in, some of it would be operating, but most of it is not.
Well, our goal is to keep operating reserves and contingency so we can budget, but the residual is really used for capital, right? And an extraordinary operating expenses. It's that rate stabilization, that reserve amount that we hold. And a majority of that we would use for capital spend.
And the reason I'm asking that is I think one of the sort of views from the public is if you look at this, one might say we've got $450 million sitting in a savings account, essentially. And that would be a critique that some would propose. The story is a lot more complicated than
Yes.
that, but that's why I'm asking the question. Or I kind of already know the answer, but I feel like it's important for the community at large to really understand what that means and why it's like that and what the intended use of that money is.
And so as you can see on the trending, an existing 4% rate increases, one debt issuance, we do see a reduction in reserves over that period of time. But I can speak to that a little bit on this next slide, where I really talk about why we have reserves. And I wanted to start with telling a story about when I first came to the district back in 2007. And we were really in a fiscal crisis at that point in time. We had about 80 million in reserves. 50 million of that was sanitary, 30 million of that was swim, and we started seeing capital uptick. We were in the past like 30 million roughly on average. We were suddenly starting to hit that 50 million mark. We were consistently pulling out 50 million in projects, and we didn't have the cash to fund it. So we stepped back, we identified all the projects that were under construction we couldn't stop, and the ones that we weren't, we put them on hold. We needed to go out and get money in the market. Unfortunately, it was during the housing crisis. So we went out to market in 2009, like the worst market to be in, to try to get funding. And as part of that, we had debt already outstanding on our books that was backed by surety bonds. So basically this other insurance company was guaranteeing your maximum debt payments for you, and they were under market. We were actually a higher credit rating than they were. So we had to go in then and cash fund those reserves and then go out to market. And at that point in time, we issued over 157 million in debt between 2009 and 2010 at AAA standard rating, Standard & Poor's rating, and Moody's AA3. Based on and as this happened, then we had to go in and adjust our rates. We increased them. In the past, we were really kind of keeping it at 3% per year. After that happened, we were having to go at 5-6% in rate increases over time to cover that debt. And so the board at that time saw the need for fiscal management, and we adopted in 2010 some financial policies and procedures, and we set in place a very strong forecasting mechanism, a strong CIP, and our goal was to be able to do what needed to be done without significant increases in rates for the customer, and not have to find ourselves going out into the market in a bad time when we shouldn't. So building those reserves over time so we could do that.
So those reserves, just to follow up on this line of discussion, those reserves really are not designated, or there's no requirement that they be spent on capital. That's how we're using them, but they're I mean, this is a different
Yeah.
environment than honestly public agencies I'm used to working with who, struggle to have anything in the savings account. So I think that's an interesting thing or something we should at least be keeping in mind, that is not restricted to capital use.
Yeah, no, that is true.
So are there any regulatory or legal issues on where these reserve funds can be spent and where they cannot be?
Yeah. So we do have some restricted reserves, and they relate to system development charges. So any of the funds that we have in SDC funds, those are restricted to reimbursement, debt service, or growth. So construction, capital projects. And then also in our debt service reserve fund, we are required to hold reserves at the maximum debt payment for 1 year. In that fund. So those are the
There are
only
some
ones really
guidelines and
restricted.
restrictions.
Yeah. Otherwise, they can be used. Obviously, you would want to use your reserves not to meet operating particularly, but for extraordinary or capital projects that, come up.
Chair, this is really the area that I'm struggling with the most. I know that the agency has a lot of physical structure, from pipes, pumps, and all kinds of different devices. But when I look at the numbers, if I've read it correctly on page 79, the reserves total $340.7 million. And so that's where I'm trying to figure out, okay, how does that compare with, for example, the 5-year planning that you have for the CIP? Because I know, I've seen it demonstrated for years, how it, as you say, it's a lean organization, you're very prudent. But as an agency, as we navigate with all of our peer local governments and service districts, we're all under financial stress, and my head is having difficulty with why some of these figures
And you,
are so high.
you had to step out right when we talked about the question you did have.
Oh, okay.
On,
I'll-
and I actually put.
I'll
We went back. No,
rewatch
it's
the
okay because
broadcast.
I'll show there. The main thing I wanted to point out on that slide is that is our forecast, and as you can, and this includes the $75 million debt issuance in 26. And it's showing you there that with the capital program we have in place, with a reduction to 90%, based on historical trend, what we really spend in capital, it is showing us that we are going to spend down some of those reserves on these capital programs. We have, we went from, 50 million to now we're bumping to closer to 100 million a year in funding.
Got it.
Here's also
That's
way,
the trend I
yeah,
didn't grasp.
the other way to think about it, when you're running a business or a utility, you have your rates, and then you have what your operating expense, and then when you subtract that, that's what's left for capital. So they call that operating income. So what you're seeing here with the rates, when it's below the line, it means we have adequate rates and operating income to fund everything through cash. But the moment you see that dotted line go to 2025, we actually need more resources to be able to accomplish that capital because the operating income isn't enough. So what we do is we bring the reserves down to be able to pay that without bumping the rate above 4%. So the whole goal is managing between how much net operating income you create for pay-as-you-go capital versus when you need to do capital without bumping the rate. So you're actually balancing all of that. So the Clean Water Services team is real good at doing their budget, and they try to drive the costs down annually. So that's why you see the trend, that solid blue line on the top, the reserves are growing. So she'll have some other slides. What you're finding is we're approaching the knee of the curve where the actual reserves begin going down. So that's the beauty of being financially stable. This is what a utility looks like when it's financially stable. But it's always the question, do we have too much? Can we take a rate holiday? Can we reduce the rate? And the worry is you see the years of 26, 27, 28, it gets a little better. It's almost matching in 29. You want to be in a place where your net operating income has enough for pay-as-you-go for your investment. Our biggest worry is what's outside of that window, Chair. And I love the fact that you asked that question, because really, to give you the full picture, we should begin showing you the forecast for the next 10 years. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair. This is, tell me how Hag Lake comes into this picture, because it seems FY29 might be sooner than that project's going to start, but it seems like CWS is going to need reserves for Hag Lake.
Yeah. And, so at this point, we believe it starts in 29 with completion in 2035. We have some idea right now of numbers, but they will change as it extends out, the project deadline. But we, in our 10-year forecast, then we mark in. The idea will be a repayment agreement. It would start when completion of the project is done. And so putting in terms, kind of determine that repayment agreement and loading that into our forecast as we look to see what kind of reserves would we need to build. So maybe we wouldn't have to impact the ratepayer with that adjustment for the repayment agreement.
I'd like to ask one more question on this. We're talking about dials that we can turn in relationship to this graph. What I didn't hear mentioned is the dial of extending the timeline for capital projects. So and my assumption, and I just want to highlight that, is that we also have that option. My question embedded in that is, where are we obligated by regulatory work to not extend those? I mean, what's the balance there?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And Rick Shanley and his team are constantly looking. So they planned it through master plans, but they do not trigger a project until the actual capacity trigger is there or the compliance trigger is there. So that's how they're sequencing it out. And they're doing it every single year to be able to tightly manage capital.
Well, that said, is there ever a time based on our capital that we go ahead of the capacity or the compliance piece in preparation for that?
It's a really good question. We tend not to leave a lot of idle capacity around, because once you make that capital investment, you have all of this technology and equipment. So you want to trigger that when you see the technology that's being delivered, right? And you saw that at WEFTEC. You know, we're looking at PFAS, and you saw some of that technology. The future looks like a mad scientist experiment, and that's continually improving. And that's what the team R&I does, and the engineering team, is really to find that right balance and when to trigger. Yeah.
Kathy, one last question.
Yeah.
On this slide, for GFOA best practice, is there a goal or a target by which GFOA best practices say that you should retain X percentage? I'm looking for what that percentage might be, if there is such a thing, in reserves based upon your annual operating expenditures.
And, you know, for general government, they do, you know, in particular, have some reserve limits, like as a percentage of operating. But I always want to look at reserves in a utility by what you need to have good credit rating, and what are the metrics with other utilities, and are you meeting those? And that's really important, I think, and how we tell the story of our reserves.
And that is something that I think you have, and Diane, the agency has tried to help us as board of directors appreciate, because when we talk to our peers as local public agencies, we're comparing apples or fruit to vegetables. Where even though this is a public utility, it's still a utility versus a government. So thank you for clarifying and making sure I'm in the right space.
Yeah, that's so insightful, Chair, because when you're running a utility, to have long-term resiliency, you want at least a year of operating expense so you can manage a downturn. A short-term resiliency is having 6 months. If you have anything less than that, a utility is very vulnerable because, as I said, it's net operating income that allows you to have capital. So, yes, thank you, Chair. Appreciate that.
And just to add a refinement to that too, when you look at that, so as we built those reserves over time and we went back out to the market for refunding on our debt, we actually then were able to get a AAA rating. So the highest rating on our bond issuances, which means lower costs for us. And a lot of times on the AAA rating, it's pretty competitive with state revolving fund monies, with Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, WIFIA monies. It's a good cost-effective way to issue debt for us. And with that, to get that AAA rating, the rating agency indicated these key things that I think speak to the impact of the board has had on the district and the management of the district. It talks about strong management practices, track record of regular rate adjustments and well-developed and reasonable assumptions, annually updated 10-year forecasts and capital improvement plans that provide the board with a clear trajectory of rate increases necessary to meet revenue requirements. Strong governance practices, commitment of the board to approve service rates annually. Strong management practices, well-defined financial forecasts and capital plans. Strong liquidity. Liquidity is reflected in days cash on hand. I have a metric in the roadmap on page 79 as we rate all our metrics that talks about a median AAA water sewer storm utility metric is 1,600 days. Clean Water Services in 2024 was 1,282 days. So you think about as you use down reserves, you impact that liquidity. And one of the warnings that they usually give in the rating agency is if you have significant reductions in liquidity, that could be something that makes you not stable and could adjust your rate. And with that.
Thank you, Kathy. We've now reached our first public comments session. Clerk Moss, will you guide our speakers if we have any speakers coming up?
Thank you, Chair Song. Is there any member in the auditorium that wishes to provide public comment as you've heard the presentation thus far? I'll give you just a moment to raise your hands. Start coming forward. Not seeing any in the room. Is there any member of the public online via Zoom that wishes to provide public comment to the Clean Water Services Budget Committee at this time for 2 minutes per person? I'll give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands. Chair Song.
Thank you, Clerk Moss. Oh.
Excuse me,
Oh.
there's a...
Yes.
I have a question. Come up to the table and just give your name and ask your question. I'm Sue Remkite, and I live at 6592 Southwest 88th Place, which is unincorporated. And I'm a widow. I live in only person in my house. And I was looking at the comparison of my water bill, which is Raleigh Hills, and your Clean Water Services. And I'm looking down at the first, my water bill from Clean Services was $100, basically $100. But, so I understand the sewer usage charge, which was $10.29. The surface water charge was $21.94. I understand that. But the top bill, the sewer base charge was $70.62. And I was overwhelmed with the difference in those. And that higher bill, I try and be economical with my water, but that higher bill seems really a lot higher than it should be for a household with one person. And I must say, I appreciate when I call the office, the girls that answered the phone, they were very kind and directed me here. And I appreciate the time that the board that you're doing. I've been on the Park and Rec Board in Beaverton and Walton Hills, so I know board service. So I'm concerned about my bill. The other thing I'm wondering, as a service, do you get money when people build new construction? Park districts, there's a piece in there when you build a new house that you pay for this part that's in there. So I'm hoping that you get a cut
when new services are put in. But I'm just, that just seems like an awful lot of money. So that's why I'm here. And be kind to other people. Well, be kind to my budget too, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your public comment, and I'd ask a member of our employee staff to meet with you to discuss your bill at our upcoming break. Thank you.
Kathleen, could you explain system development charges and how those relate to the new construction? Please?
Yeah, sure. So Clean Water Services does have its own system development charges for both sanitary sewer and stormwater, and it's for individuals that connect to the system. They pay into existing capacity that's in the system and new improvements in that. So we utilize those SDCs to cover part debt service for already constructed assets and then new development. So new construction in the future to meet that capacity need. We establish those based on master planning and needed infrastructure that is capacity enhancing. So we do have our own system development charges that we charge to the customer.
And I'd ask Kathy if you would take a moment at the break to have this discussion.
Sure, I will.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we've reached our first break. We'll break now and reconvene at 10:40.
I'll look at her bill. Yeah, and Erin has her bill in her, so she's. Yeah, she will. Yeah, don't use your water. Yeah.
One slide.
Just construction projects in general. I work with overseers, and I just wanted to
Hey, I'm Elizabeth.
I'm Salvador.
Hey, Salvador. Nice to meet you too.
I work with the bricklayers.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to see if there's something we can do about the projects and not, there's like discussions that can be had about, I'm doing the position, I'm organizing, doing market surveys and stuff, and it seems like all the projects that are ongoing have a new contract. I just wanted to see if there's something that we can discuss moving forward, or there's something that I can do.
They're on break. They're the perfect group because they can show you their engineering team when they're, because then they can show you all the projects that are getting ready.
I actually have another meeting.
Leave it with me and I'll make the connection. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, totally.
I'm also a resident in Hillsborough, so
Yeah.
this is awesome.
These are great jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys are union as well. Teamsters?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Here's my card too.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. I will save your contact information and you can have them, one of them email me, call me, or whatever.
Yeah.
And we can discuss something.
Right on. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Yeah. Cool. The Post-its, they're gone now.
Are we returning?
10:40.
Are you guys going to I know.
So November, December, January, February is when we have.
No, I was supposed to, but
That drives you.
You brought up that.
You kind of see the shoulders drop.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's doesn't mean that.
Yes. But even your and it's based on your There's a trick. Yeah. Yeah. To save money, like saving how much the basis, yeah, the basis. You can move more to variable, but it makes more variation, right?
No, we'll talk about it because we have something similar going on in our board. Going to tiers. There's no one solution to any of these. I also say that, see, even though technically I'm retired and I'm not getting any of these, we still have a monthly income. Whether it's from
Social Security, it's not an awful lot.
That's why I'm on the 12-month program.
We have to teach people.
Yeah, awareness.
Like my mother was a widow. She had very little of her own pension. She was a registered nurse. She had my dad's pension from the federal government. But, it still wasn't enough. So she's paying a little bit. It really helped. It's stress too.
People are good at it, some people are not. What's the big problem?
But it's teaching people. Really is teaching. I'm gonna get well because I'm still very sick. No, I think so. I need a replacement. So the knee that needs replacement, it's so unstable. Just since I got this knee brace. So I try to do it, to make sure it's some exercise. But they won't operate because of my heart.
I went through a whatever surgery.
It's harder to do.
I just switched it so that we can.
Oh, yeah, it's nice. The green light on that one is live. During the break, I'm like,
It is now 10:40. Oh, thank you, Renee. It is now 10:40. We'll begin to reconvene. Thank you. Thank you. Next up is organizational changes for efficiency. Diane?
Thank you. You know, this is a little hard to see from so far away, but this is the operations in 24-25. You know, in 24-25, all of the executives were in one spot in the office of the CEO. But what I wanted you to see is the program responsibilities for all of the executives. I'm actually going to have to take my glasses off to read my slide here. So starting from the left, we have the Chief Compliance Officer in the General Counsel's office. So they were focused on legal services and then also the RAD group, which is the Regulatory Affairs Department. So those are also compliance services, environmental services in the lab. Then we have the Chief of Staff, which is Elizabeth Edwards. Caroline Lobdell, is the General Counsel Chief Compliance Officer. And within the Chief of Staff, she's responsible for government affairs, emergency management, grants, and community engagement was in the office of the CEO at the time, but it's been managed actually by Joe Gall since Mark Jockers retired. Then you have the Chief Financial Officer, who's responsible for the Finance and Accounting Department. So Kathy has the functions of budget, utility billing, treasury, accounting, and forecasting and rate development. Then with the Chief Utility Relations Officer, which is Joe Gall, he's responsible for development services and systems planning, but in 2024 he was actually overseeing the communications and community engagement group. So within the Chief Business Officer, which is Jack Liang, he has digital solutions and human resources department and business operations and strategy, which is the culture, equity, and learning, the business operations, risk insurance, procurement, administrative services, and strategy development. Then we have the Chief Engineer and Water Technology Officer, which is Rick Shanley. He has responsibility for water and engineering technology department, water resources recovery and services department, utility operations and services department, the natural systems and enhancement and stewardship department, and also the enterprise asset and technical services department. So when you look at this chart, in order to create more efficiency within Clean Water Services, we had an opportunity with the Enterprise Asset and Technical Services Department because a vacancy occurred. So they were really able to look through from a business flow and process as to what was the best way to deliver asset management, the control systems, the technical support, which had engineers in that group, and safety and facilities maintenance. It also provided the opportunity to take a look at our biosolids reuse and Fernhill program, which is essentially external to the wastewater programs. So it's services to the farmers who receive our biosolids, services to the water reuse customers who receive our reclaimed water, and also the Fernhill operations, which is the natural treatment system. Under the Chief Business Officer, it allowed us to really look at the Business Opportunities Department because we were wanting to start from a performance excellence standpoint, a program on ethical business practices within a utility. And also within IT, we needed to really look at the help desk services and how we were going to support the IT infrastructure that the employees and the offices have been deployed. Within the Chief Utility Relations Officer, they were really looking at the efficiency between development services and systems planning. Because with these groups, you end up with program managers and supervisors and et cetera, so it's important to continually look at efficiencies. Within the Chief of Staff, we didn't have an emergency manager at Clean Water Services. It was really looking at what did we need to begin that effort, to begin planning and the sustainability and resiliency under emergency operations. And we looked at, since the Chief Utility Relations Officer was running communications and community engagement, what we needed to do with that. So within this current budget, in 25-26, what you're seeing here is on the top, it's our elected officials with the Board of Clean Water Services, and as the CEO, it's an appointed staff. So it's really making sure the board has direct legal support to the board from the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer, and a board liaison relationship with the Chief of Staff. So we wanted to fix that flow. So when you look at the Chief Engineer and Water Technology Officers group, they were able to no longer need a department called the Enterprise Asset and Technical Services Group because the engineers wanted to be grouped as engineers. And then you can manage their development from all the way from entry-level engineering to a principal engineer. And there was a recognition that reuse is really an external service that we want to optimize based on resource recovery. So that's why the reuse group has become part of the water engineering and technology group as it relates to research and innovation. We knew that safety was district-wide and it needed to be incorporated within the program related to risk management and safety. So it's been incorporated there. Facilities management came over from the elimination of the EATS department and to be able to do the district-wide occupied building work. The Chief Utility Relations Officer, he really found the efficiency between the planning and development services, so he wanted to create one group, and then bringing in the communications and community engagement folks to really push both external communications, our website, our social media, the events that happens within the community, and the engagement with the city partners, and then and they also do internal communications with the Culture and Equity and Learning Group. And then the creation of an emergency manager at Clean Water Services. And then within the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer, internal compliance as it relates to wanting to start this ethical business practice and also cybersecurity, because it's a best practice to separate the folks that are monitoring for cybersecurity from the underlying IT systems, and in our case, we call it digital solutions. So you've got people doing the day-to-day, you've got people monitoring for security, because intrusions are not only external, intrusions can be internal also. So it's really a compliance part of our programs. And procurement, because procurement, we need to make sure that we're in compliance with the standards of the district as it relates to contracts, as it relates to the flow of materials and services. So this program has been the programs for 25-26 have been put into these cost centers. The executive staff is now within the cost centers. They're no longer just this generalized group. They have specific requirements for their departments and their functions and their oversight. So that's what we did in 25-26. And I wanted to kind of pause there if there's any questions.
Thanks for making this chart. Thanks for making this chart. This kind of helped answer a question I was going to have on this one. So if I understand this correctly, it's got more of the horizontal functions in the bottom half and the vertical content expertise on the top. Is that right?
Yes, because the top half is the operating services, right? The bottom half is the administrative support services that supports that work.
Okay. So in my experience, where I've seen these kind of art charts, the horizontal functions are a lot more efficient and smaller compared to the functional areas they support. From what I read here, it's about 280 engineering services to that of about 214 on the horizontal services. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
So how do you realize the efficiencies on these horizontal functions? Do you have a process where you can figure out if I'm performing or if I'm providing a service to one department, it could be applied to the other departments, or does it go department at a time?
Yeah, one of the efforts we have been making year after year is to create integrated workflow and processes, right? So the team is actually defining whose role is what within the organization. So in capital planning, it takes not only the engineers, right, to do capital planning. It takes operations and maintenance to help develop the asset management requirements. It takes finance to be able to drive the financial planning. So what they're doing, they call them DRUNIs, is that what we're calling them? So how do you, DRENUs. Yeah.
Who makes decisions, recommendation, input, uninvolved, and needs to know.
And
that category to the different
yeah.
Could we repeat that on camera? On a mic?
I'm up next office.
Or,
So it's similar to what folks would, maybe others would refer to as a RACI diagram, but we've kind of tailored this to our own. So for all the different folks that are involved in a project, we have a DRUNI or a DRENU, but it's who makes decisions, who makes recommendations, who provides input, who's on a need to know, and who is uninformed
okay,
for
good.
various
I'm familiar
processes.
with the rapid model.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
very similar, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good. And a related but a follow-up question, maybe it'll come to you too. This org chart is very helpful, but what it doesn't tell me is what we call as spans and levels. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
So how is your spans and levels in the organization?
That's a great question. So we're actively looking, we call it N0, right, which is
Right.
the executive going to the N1 level, the N2 level, and the N3 level. So we have charts that define all of that. So we're looking at where there's overlap, right? So for instance, the GIS program, we had a group in our USD, we had a group in natural systems. And what you notice is when you do a silo, you get multiple supervisors and et cetera. And you get differing job classifications. So what we did in this year, we put them into a group. So they're right now under digital solutions, and you're going to hear that. So we can get consistency in job descriptions, a reduction of the supervisory chain, because you, instead of two groups, you have one. And you get a focus on delivering these internal services, right, between base mapping and also the special projects. So the people that are super users of GIS, they're using it as a tool, right, to do their work. Those that are building the base systems are in one group that manages all the way up to the software. So that's how we're integrating across the district to minimize supervisory levels, right? Otherwise, this chain of command creates all of these positions, and then how do you deploy services that are integrated across?
Yeah, do you have, you can pull it out of thin air if you want to. Do you have some numbers against what's the max span and what's the max level?
Yeah, we're looking for a from 5 to 1 to 6 to 1. We're trying to, some of these we have 1 to 2. And those are the ones that we're consciously looking at, right, to get more efficiency. Yeah, but field crews are bigger. I mean, they're like 1 to, with FCMT3s that are more like lead workers. I mean, there's like 20 people in a group. So it's really finding the right span of control for the work that's being done. Those are all great questions.
Usually there is a sweet spot where you're not delaying decision-making. At the same time, you're reducing the management overhead.
Correct.
I'm trying to understand how you guys address that or how that's being done in the organization.
That'd be a great conversation for the board and CWAC to see not only the functional level, but the underlying N0 to N4. Yeah, that'd be great.
Future agenda topic.
Yeah, that's something for the future people to do. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's awesome. Okay.
I have one question or a point here. This is very informational. It's good knowledge. The problem I have is, and I think I mentioned this in some of our discussions in preparing questions, is understanding how the org chart has changed. Mm-hmm. It's not just what it is today, but what it is over time, and understanding, just to give me context. That's not for today, but it would be helpful information for me.
That'd be great.
Jason?
I guess in that context, and this is going back to some prior information that was provided this morning, but I think it speaks to what Director Treese was just raising, and I guess as we go through the overall discussions, it would be helpful for me to understand how from 5 to 7 years ago, there were about 375 FTEs, and there's now 450 is kind of the round number I see. And I mean, I've been working as a community leader in this space during that time, not on the commission directly, but in agencies that were working directly with CWS. And I guess I don't know that we're conveying a lot more water and, I mean, maybe we are creating or discharging more output. But I'm on a big picture scale, I think in a 5 to 7 year period when we don't have huge population growth, I have questions about just big picture, what are those people doing? Why is that necessary? And that definitely seems like it's not at a pace of just inflation. There may be very good reasons for it. I'm not suggesting there aren't, but I think being able to explain that is also going to be important.
Maybe that will be my final gift.
Okay.
Is to put that down so you can see it from 5 years ago to today. And it's things like Kathy's. We had been operating so lean. Kathy didn't have enough financial people. So it was broadening that. We weren't focused on our asset management yet. We were good on capital delivery for growth, but we needed to create that. So we'll tell that story, and that will be my gift to the organization. And then you can take it to the next level. Yeah. Sounds good. Okay. So the budget changes are focused on cost allegations. So the executives are onboarded, and now they're budgeted within their cost centers. The organizational changes for oversight and efficiency, it's really the procurement oversights as well as the internal compliance to start the ethical business practice that we started this year and turning it into the actual programs, and then aligning cybersecurity within that program. The Chief Utility Relations Officer we talk about, his oversight of the communications and community engagement and the planning and development services to focus as one group. The chief engineer, so we sunsetted, we worked with the team, and this was actually a recommendation from the team to improve their workflow throughout the organization as it related to asset management. So we're sunsetting the EATS program, we're taking some efficiencies, and they're being able to put them within capital planning, the O&M group, and the engineering group. So that's the hope, to really drive that asset management plan well into the future. So that's a gift I think Rick would give. And the reuse program, really getting our resource recovery programs firing on all cylinders. So the chief business officer, the functions that came to that is safety and facilities maintenance that I talked about. And digital solutions, I mean, our work is done incredibly more and more with the software programs. I worry about when the emergency occurs and the computers are down because we're so reliant on it. And we had a circumstance when our internet went out, and we were all going, we're having to work from scratch from home and trying to get connections. But we are very aligned to our digital systems. And there was a question about when is CWS planning for its ERP. That's a really good question. And Kathy's pushed it to the window of the 5-year, I think, yeah. But right now, we're still stable with our Oracle on-prem and our NeoGov. So that'll be a good report to talk to the board as we're planning through the ERP systems. So digital solutions, they're going to be integrating GIS, and their big challenge is to make sure they are good customer service to the other departments with the base mapping and the upgrades to our underlying GIS system. Then with our functionaries, we teed Rick's team up first this year. We kind of mixed it up, didn't we? So we got engineering services and water and engineering technology.
Thank you. Great. Haven't seen this slide before, so I'm going to go back. Okay. Maybe this, but fair enough.
They tricked you.
So engineering services, functional areas, Diane's done a great job of kind of covering some of those, and I'll get into more details. But overall, the group has 80 FTEs, 61 filled, many unfilled. I would say one of the biggest challenges that we've had are trying to recruit engineering staff. It's exceptionally competitive between the public and the private sector. We've done well. but I haven't seen it this difficult in many years. So those are some of the key things that we've been working with our HR folks on, is trying to get some of those vacancies filled. We've had some folks retire and so forth. Yeah.
First of all, I'd like you to introduce yourself to the microphone so you're on the record as to who the heck you are.
Okay.
And then also your title, because I'm looking at this org chart here, and there's a lot of bubbles underneath your name, and so maybe you could introduce yourself and your position in the organization.
Happy to do so. So, Rick Shanley, I'm the Chief Engineer and Water Technology Officer. So I'm going to start by talking about the Water and Engineering Technology Department, which was pretty new. Last year was the first year that I was here in that capacity, and so I'll certainly go over this again. With respect to my overall responsibilities, though, I do now have the operations part, so with respect to the water resource recovery facilities, field operations, as well as NSES. So I'm going to take this into lunch, and then I'm going to hand it off to some amazing, capable folks that they'll each represent those groups. From my perspective, this has been a great change. Being able to have the water and the engineering department more aligned with operations and giving me the opportunity to work directly with these folks, I think is a good example of how we've tried to streamline and be more efficient at the top of the organization. I think it's improved communication between our group. I'll talk a bit about asset management. I want to say it here and hopefully say it many times. That's really one of the key challenges that we're faced as a utility right now. And having that more integrated group effort between engineering and the folks in the field that know the assets and provide condition assessment, I think is a growth opportunity for us as a district to get to. So I've really enjoyed this new role that I've had, the expanded role, and I'm looking forward to continuing to do that. Okay. So the department, we call it the WET department, pun intended, basically. It does integrate all project phases. So on that first slide, this is a little bit more graphical representation of what the group does. So we have research innovation, capital planning, project delivery, which is broken down into treatment plant services that do the plant work, and conveyance, which does the pump stations and the pipes. We do construction, and we do startup and commissioning. I just want to point out a couple things. Research and innovation really drives a lot of our capital planning. We're not doing research, in the sense of a university does research. The research that we are doing is to understand when do we need to make improvements. We do try to be very strategic in understanding our capacity and when we're going to hit triggers, so we don't build things too quick. We don't wait too long. This is a great, fun field for our engineers to be in because the technology is always emerging. So we like to wait and see how things develop. We do pride ourselves on bringing new technologies in place, and I think that's one of the reasons we're very competitive in the industry. And so R&I has a lot to do with understanding what we need to build for compliance, what we need to do for capacity, and as well as supporting operations, the folks that are in the field, and supporting the end of the process, which is startup and commissioning. Capital planning, we work with Kathy and her team. We provide the information for the CIP, and we let them do the magic to figure out, what's the best way to pay for it and how we're going to get it done. And that was a lot of the really good discussion that we had earlier today. Project delivery, I mentioned. Previously, a lot of this, we talked about EATS coming in. So there was an engineering group over here, and then we had engineers in different groups. We brought us together, and having all the engineers together, I think, is another good example of trying to do more with less. Engineers are not stuck in any sandboxes. They go across different fields and work together. Construction used to be segmented too. Now we have one team that does construction. Construction goes up and down, up and down. So having one team where we can maneuver folks and switch them around, I think, is helping us to, be aware and try to be prudent with our FTEs. So this one's pretty busy, so I'll just hit a few of the kind of key pieces here. So Diane mentioned reuse. It really is resource recovery. We have our Ostara We love non-rate revenue. We make fertilizer. That team owns that program. Recycled water is a huge component for our compliance, thermal compliance. So they are the team that's specific and dedicated to leading that effort. Biosolids is one of those big items that's hanging out there. There's a lot of stuff in the paper about forever chemicals and biosolids. Article in the New York Times yesterday. So that team, along with their integration into the Research and Innovation Group, is understanding what that might mean for clean water services and how do we prepare our CIP and understand what that could mean for us. So that's a very welcome addition. Capital planning, in addition to supporting the CIP development, they do a lot of work on projects as well. They're helping us with our master plans and leading those efforts, permitting, easement, all the soft things that have to happen to get projects done. They own that. And they're the glue early on that brings all of the departments together to make sure we are looking at watershed benefits if we're putting a pipe in the ground. So those are a few key things that I wanted to point out from those groups. So budget drivers, we do have one new FTE. That's a field engineer that will be responsible for our E&IC systems that are in the field. Those are growing. Diane mentioned, there's a lot of great benefits in that, but they are important systems, and we do need additional resources because it has grown so much. The big change is the transfer of the FTEs from the EATS department. Proposed training and travel budget is $132,800. That number is reflective of, we have a lot of professional engineers, there's lots of licensing, there's lots of certifications that we do. Our team, the R&I team, does go to many conferences, as does the group in general. I think we hit about 16 different conferences. We presented a lot of them. But we have a very strict vetting process on who gets to go. We have to approve what we're doing. And so we feel like it's important to make a good business case to get to go to do these types of things. And we have several roadmaps that help us to get there. And so that's what's represented in that budget. The reuse program I hit upon, and then because I want to say asset management a lot, I'll say asset management again. That's a big part of now that is owned in the wet department, along with control systems. Again, how we're controlling the plants, how does the research and innovation team bring in new instrumentation, and then the control system folks know the care and feeding, and then we're able to operate effectively and efficiently. Yeah.
We pause just for a moment. Clerk Moss, is there someone looking at what that noise generation is?
I'm checking into that for the board.
Is it outside?
Yeah, I think it is too.
Oh, never mind. I'll go tell him. Excuse me. Are you wearing your ear protection?
Okay, thank you. It was driving me crazy too. So it would be nice to be able to compare kind of the historical budget and benchmarking. Clearly, we've had some pretty big changes between FY25 and FY26. So a lot of additions from the other departments have resulted in moving money basically into my group, and that's about 80% increase over the past. So capital planning, as I mentioned, they're a lead in defining and working on our capital project budgeting, helping us to prioritize, and I'll show the 5-year CIP coming up. How do we sequence our projects? How do we get everybody in the room together and prioritize these things? That's a key thing that has to happen. So we are balancing, when do we really need to do capacity? How are we ready for the regulatory pieces? And how do we get the asset management projects in place? So we do triggers every year. Diane mentioned this. We are doing our master plans. We're going to bring them pretty quick to get adopted. But they will change. We will be looking at growth and regulatory and all kinds of things every year. And we've got a lot of tools to help us make that pretty efficient so we can adjust the CIP. We do want to try to push things off, when we can. we're looking at renewal and replacement projects as well as capacity. And that is not a new thing by any means for the district, but the urgency, I think, has gotten newer. I can relate. I'm getting older. These things are, some of our assets are 50 years old. And so really getting a long-term plan on our assets is something that is the next step. And there's a lot of science that we can do. And how do we evaluate these existing assets and monitor those assets and understand well in advance of failure is what we're really striving to improve on in our capital planning group, along with our operations group.
Rick, I hear you describe this has been described multiple times, but this don't build it too fast, but also don't fail to build it when you need it.
Yeah.
And the trigger conversation. I guess what I'm getting out of all that is that you all are, and it's hard for me to think about this, but you're essentially using, I think, the concept of like just-in-time kinds of logistics ways of thinking about when to deliver something, which, given how long it takes you to get something done, just seems,
Yeah.
I'm not in your space, but it seems like it would be tricky, and I hope we err on the side of caution slightly. I'm sure you do, but is that a fair way to think about this? Like, you don't want to build it too fast?
It is a fair way to think about it.
Okay.
And we used to actually have that as kind of we do this just in time. So I would answer it this way. I don't stay awake at night worrying about that we're not going to be able to get something done in time. So for me, just in time starts with, when do we begin a project? So if we think we're going to be out of capacity in 2030, every year from now, and the trigger is, when do we start the conceptual planning and thinking? So the trigger is 3 to 4 years in advance of when we think we're going to need it, and that helps. And then the other key part is very frequent communication with the member cities and our industries. So they're aware, especially large industries, of how long it takes us to do a project. So we have to meet with them routinely and understand. They know what kind of notice we need to get something done, and we are prepared to move on certain projects quicker than 3 to 4 years if we need to be. So it sounds like we're waiting and waiting, but I think with the proper advanced thinking about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, and knowing how long it's going to take, and then making sure we've got the input we need to know that we can pull the trigger in time.
It sounds like something that's both an art and a science.
It is, to some extent. I would say that is a fair assessment. The hardest ones are, with pump stations and things with development, those types of pieces. But over the years, I think working with our co-implementers and working with the development community, we all have a pretty good understanding of the timing and urgency of getting those done. So it's a core tenet of clean water from the day I've been here. We never want to hold anything back. So they're very opposite kind of when you think about it that way, but that is ingrained in all of us. That's part of, being part of Washington County. We don't want to slow anybody down. And we haven't.
Thank you. I think it's really important for us to, I feel more confident now, just even in the last few minutes of your description of that, and the goals, and also the fact that it sounds like the way you also are approaching things, or this team is there are things that are going to have to be done. Exactly when, you don't know. And if a large corporation were to call tomorrow and say, hey, we're going to build this, you all would then have to be like, oh, we got to take this off the shelf and this off the shelf, and we got to start working them.
Yeah.
And that gives me more confidence. So I'll stop on this line of questioning, but I think it's
a great question. And we could talk for a long time. We have different ways to deliver projects. You can accelerate things that cost more money. So there are tools, but that if you were to get in that situation, that work to our favor as well. Yeah, this is the fun stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thanks. So first thing is a compliment. I really, having been an engineer myself all my career, it's good to have the engineers be able to attend conferences and things like that. I'm assuming it includes also subscriptions and so on.
Mm-hmm.
they need that connection with the external latest trends and so I'm happy you're doing that. An unrelated question is, do you have any of your engineering or other work contracted out? Something that's maybe short-term or something that's not a skill in your team and such like that. Do you have any such spends, or is there anything in the budget about those things?
Yeah, we do. So for delivering large capital projects, we hire consulting firms. We do not have the capacity to create, 500 sheets of drawings and all of the specifications. So the horsepower to do those bid documents is something, on those large projects, we would have a consulting work. For a smaller project, we have what we call engineering light. And when we can, we do those things in-house. I think one of the things that I came from the consulting world over to here, and one of the things I loved about Clean Water is the engagement of the engineering staff here. So it's a very technical group that drives all the decisions. We have to have that. If you're a consultant, you approach things differently. You're very safe. You're very conservative. So with our O&M staff and our engineering group, we drive the decisions. We make the decisions. We're in the meetings. We're in their offices at times. But we do need that extra resource to deliver those types of. It's a huge amount of staff to deliver those types of projects. And when we can, we do the work that we can do in-house. Were there other types of questions on that?
You answered a big part of the question.
Okay.
Whereas, sure, we can't build a 500-strong labor force to just dig out a ditch and replace a pipe and so on. Those things I can understand in the CIP space. If you can shift that focus to more like, even if it is technical services, like analytical or some skill that you don't have in your team, do you have any way that you contract it out? It could be another consulting firm, not a construction firm.
Yeah.
Do you have those kinds of budget items also?
One of the things we definitely do are contracted employees for the district. So on an individual basis, we have temporary employees. They're in the budget. So if we've got a certain need that we don't have an FTE for, but we gain the benefit of having them under, coming to our office every day, being under our roof, we certainly leverage that capacity to help address specific issues. That's across the organization. And interns and other folks like that we've brought in as well.
Yeah, that answers my question.
Okay.
Because, what you're telling me is another level of detail that you bring those skills in-house for as long as needed.
Yeah.
But they're not there.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Just another comment. You can ignore one of the questions I sent an email about research. I was intrigued by the use of research and innovation. Innovation part I can understand, but from what you're describing and also what I saw in your booklet when I went to that tab is, it's more analytical rather than research, right?
The analytical, there is an analytical component for definitely. I'll have an example where we talk about using eDNA. All the analytical work that we're doing is focused on compliance and understanding, getting better data to make decisions to put us in the right position for. We develop a long-term compliance strategy. So a lot of when you see analytical pieces, it's that. It's also analytical work within the treatment processes and the treatment plants to try to optimize their treatment capacity to save us on using chemicals and using energy and those types of things.
Yeah, so it's not really research for research's sake.
It is not ever meant to be research for research's sake. We're not after trying to, publish as many papers, in reviewed journals as possible. Sorry, I'll talk too much. No. I would say when we have a process, we do our own. When folks want to do a project, that's what we put under a research umbrella, which is probably isn't quite the right. There has to be a submission of their idea. There has to be a strong business case to justify it. It has to prove compliance. It has to prove cost effectiveness. It has to prove value. And you have to show your team, and you have to come up with a deliverable at the end. So anything we do is very much vetted to make sure that it's solving a problem for clean water and it's providing value. There's never intended to be research for the sake of, I mean, we'd like to do it, but we're optimizing our operations. We're helping our operations to solve problems. We're finding new technologies to bring in. We have several examples of that. And being recognized, I put us in the top 5 in the country easily. Having that recognition, providing that type of, going to conferences, it allows us to be on the forefront of bringing in new technologies, and that's why our rates and everything look really good, even though our permit is super difficult to meet.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for those questions. I love talking about this.
Rick,
Yeah.
a question on the outsourced design services.
Yes.
So there's a line item for professional services in the business operations. I'm assuming that the cost for the outsourced design is embedded in the capital program. It's not included in the $5 million for professional services. Maybe that's a question for Kathy.
So the district-wide sheet you're looking at?
Oh,
Yeah, that's operating.
Okay.
And if these were projects related to capital, they would be in the capital, and would not be in there, but if these were just related to general professional service, operational, they would be in that number. It depends on what specific type of activity.
Okay, B, like the outsourced design and construction.
Those are,
services.
those are embedded in our capital program.
Great.
Correct. Under those specific project, you'll see the design, row basically that goes along with construction design. If there's any separate equipment, those are part of our CIP.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So this is the 5-year plan. We have some pretty big projects in construction over the next couple of years. We have some occupied building projects that also are contributing to things being higher than they were in some of the prior years and as we move out. So that's what we tend to see when there's big construction projects. Those will cause the CIP to go up and down. But it really is a core thing of what we're trying to do is to balance the CIP over time. We'll know more about the future when the master plan is completed, which is imminent. I think we'll be back in August for final adoption of the West Basin Plan. One of the trends that you would notice, and I've certainly noticed, the conveyance part of our CIP is going up over time. Some of that's relating to the renewal and replacement, but also capacity types of pieces. So that's the light blue. The pump station piece over the next 5 years is also contributing to the conveyance rise in costs for the CIP as well.
So we've had, sorry, Chair, I have a question. That really helped in terms of identifying the drivers for the increase in conveyance investment, renewal and replacement, and capacity. And when I think about the drivers of capacity, I think about the growth, specifically growth with UGB expansion in the metro area, but also in our neighboring cities, and getting the big pipes and pump stations going for all of that. What kind of methodologies are you forecasting for additional for renewal and replacement? Do you have a trend over time, or do we just see we have major systems on a 5-year renewal and replacement, 10-year, 20-year?
Yeah.
I mean, the CIP describes the state of things, and I was blown away by the level of planning and the identification of things. But I'm just wondering if you could help us understand the drivers around, the major drivers for the trend of renewal and replacement.
Great question. So for the for the pipelines and that infrastructure, we do flow monitoring, which helps us to know inflow and infiltration. I think everyone at this committee has heard us talk about inflow and infiltration either through CWAC or through the board. So when we see those flow monitoring numbers really spike in the wintertime, we know something's going on. There's something going on with the condition of that system. So we're looking to understand where that problem exists, and do we need to, is there a way to reduce the flow so we're not doing a major expansion to capacity? Can we actually get flow out of the system? I mean, that has a lot of benefits. So the flow monitoring helps us understand the R&R projects, the TVing that we do we have a extensive program and on a routine maintenance. We TV these. Ryan can talk a lot about it. We rate all the pipes based upon their condition, so that gives us a lot of information about when we need to make improvements to those systems as well. What we'd like to do more, honestly, is get away from it's this old, so we better plan on replace. There's a lot of really developing tools that we can better understand, especially for mechanical systems. It's not just age, and I think that when I try to tell you things we want to get, I think that's one of the exciting things that we're going to really start to take advantage of new ways to monitor, taking advantage of AI, taking advantage of some of those things. So we're really good at the just-in-time, I would say, on capacity. But on the pipes and the complicated mechanical systems, I would love us to get those tools in place, to be further ahead on understanding those things. Because for right now, yes, some of the things are more, it's based upon age, and there's a lot we can do to understand the condition of those pieces.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to share a little bit about how do we pick the projects. So this is for the sanitary treatment plant project. So we get together a whole group of folks, operations, engineering, Aaron and finance groups are there. We go through every project and we numerically, as a group, come up with a score for what we feel are the key categories. So it's permit, it's impact of deferral, which is R&R, sustainability, reliability, cost effectiveness, health and safety. This list is very, very long. This is a snippet. I kept the project managers on there just so everyone understands. There's always more to do than we can get done. So first we have to prioritize based on need as a district. And then the next part is, what do the resources and what do our FTE staff allow us to do? It's usually the R&R things that end up continually getting, pushed down the road. And then CJ or Ryan has to really, be in that room and vouch for those things, because capacity and regulatory, you really can't defer those things if they're drivers for you. A few of the notable projects I mentioned, construction, Forest Grove Primary Treatment's a big one that's in construction. That's $30 million in the next fiscal year. That's a key project for compliance with copper permit limits. And actually, by having this in treatment, we'll be able to meet that for a long period of time. I mentioned there's a lot of pump stations, so I had to put a pump station on there. So the Rosedale pump station is in Hillsborough. It's about a $10 million project. It's a good example of an integrated project. We've had good involvement with the city and good involvement with Watershed and some of our other groups to try to make sure we're taking advantage of all the opportunities that exist in delivering that type of project. I mentioned solids and biosolids. Durham is building a new digester. That's the main treatment for treating biosolids. It also produces gas, which we use as a resource. We create electricity there. Rock Creek on the bottom, I'm mentioning a renewable natural gas project, which we're going to be coming back to talking to everyone more about. But we've got some really good economics to utilize that resource and really grow our non-rate revenue at the Rock Creek plant as well. And then there's some big conveyance projects that are in the mix as well with Brookman and Metzger. In addition, stormwater, we've got about $2.5 million in the budget next year for stormwater projects, different different types, including stream corridor enhancements in the blue realm, and then more of the constructed stormwater features with the green, and then the really constructed stuff, which is the gray and the pipes. Occupied building projects are a big deal right now. We are under construction of our Ripple project. As Diane mentioned, the lab at the ABC was failing. We had a picture at one point of paint peeling off the walls. It was a lot more than paint. Obviously, there were hoods and other things that were failing. But so that compliance lab is also dated from the time it was put in place to where the regulatory requirements are today. Are worlds away. So this is the lab that's going to, continue us on for the future. Well, we put in facilities, space for facilities for future analytics, but we're really focusing on just buying what we need equipment-wise today. Sample receiving logistics. We're excited that it's under construction. We did a lot of value engineering at multiple steps along the way. We were able to save about $5 million in very recognizable changes that we had the architect make to simplify that project. And the move-in date is January of 2027. So $54 million construction. Total project cost is around 65 or 66, including engineering and everything that's built into it. The other one that we're excited about is Clean Water Services Central Building, 80,000 square foot building. Again, it's really setting us up for the future as well. Our existing ABC building has lots of issues. I found a report, it needed about $13 million in renovations to keep it going, and we're never going to get rid of the bugs in there that have been falling on your head for the last many, many years. So that will be a welcome change. We're getting to a point of seismic and flood resiliency with this new location. We are, again, it's a good building. A lot of us, not a lot of us, there's probably 30 of us have moved in already. And we can take advantage of a lot of the infrastructure that's there. We're trying to really limit it to essential tenant improvements. The mechanical systems are in good and serviceable shape. We're looking to repurpose furnishings, anything that we can do to hit our target budget of about $5 million for construction. And the full transfer from our existing ABC to these folks, we see everybody that's moving here moving in 2026. Some of the ABC folks are moving to Ripple, the lab folks, so it's not like we can abandon ABC at that period of time. And I won't, but I know we're also looking at the value of that existing building and how we can get, through sale or other means, taking advantage of that.
Just a quick question about, there's a staged approach then moving employees from ABC to Central, and you currently have 30 at Central approximately.
Yeah.
And will you remind me how many that remains at ABC that will be moving to Central, not going to Ripple? Just round numbers.
Yeah. Perry, or programming Perry. Perry's our project manager on that,
100+.
as well as our treatment plant services manager, but I can't remember
That's a good
exactly.
question. I thought it was 100, some others.
Okay.
120-ish.
And that'll
I'll get
be,
back to you with the exact number.
I'm just really thinking about how that flow starts from the 30 that are there now. When will we be complete at Central? Is that on there? Full transfer November 26.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
So for example, Kathy's team, you're moving there in July?
In May and first part of June.
Okay.
Yeah. Conveyance and capital planning moved because we didn't really have space and where we were previously. So there were some strategic moves to get folks to be able to sit together and work efficiently together.
So if I could,
Yes.
Rick, you use a lot of acronyms. So ABC is where the current administration is. It's located at Jackson Bottom Wetlands, okay? Ripple is located in Forest Grove. Yes. CWS Central is off of 158th in Beaverton alongside the Sunset Highway. It's on the south side of the highway. You access it off of 158 or Bethany, whatever that exit is called. But anyway, just for clarification there. And then I thought our renovation of CWS Central was going to be considerably more than $5 million. So that's our budget for getting it up to speed and moving everybody in is $5 million. Because I think in this budget you have 2.5, and next year you have 2.5.
Yeah, we have 5 million in the budget for construction.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a target where we are striving very much to hit. We are at 30% design, and so the budgeting accuracy gets a lot better over time, but knowing we have kind of set a line in the sand, I think is going to help us to really drive that home to try to continue along that. So I would just say if we get to a next level and we see that we're trending differently than that, we would certainly want to come back and make some decisions with the group on how to move forward. But I think we're going to be able to hit that target based upon what we know right now. And there are things that we could defer if we needed to, or but that's a decision you make. Do you want to defer certain things and come back, or do you want to do them now? But based upon where we're at, that's our construction cost target, $5 million.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to clarify, when you say construction costs, that's internal to the building shell renovation, correct? It's not the construction of a new location.
Correct. It's all.
I just want to make
what
sure
would,
that
yeah, basically, we're calling it tenant improvements.
Tenant improvements.
Tenant improvements.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say the team did a really great job because buildings now are costing about $1,000 a square foot with some of the partners in the region, whether it's Public Works or a police building. This team is delivering that from the purchase of the building and the tenant improvements at about $240 to $250 a square foot. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, congratulations.
We'll be about 125 maybe for Central if we can stay on track.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a little bit deeper dive on the research and innovation. Teed me up nicely with respect to analytical and preparation for future work. I mentioned eDNA testing. We're actually able to see what's happening with fish passage by looking at eDNA instead of trying to go out there and physically look and count for fish. So the way the regulations currently exist, it could drive us to needing to build coolers, which we've never wanted to do on our effluent to meet thermal compliant. It's very expensive to build. It's very expensive. It's bad for the environment. And what we're able to show preliminarily is with this eDNA testing that we are not a barrier to fish passage. And so having that type of regulation, we're able to provide DEQ with information. They want to make great decisions, and we're able to provide good information to them to make good decisions. So that's one example. I wanted to give a few specific examples. Indents, we call it densification. So one of our processes, we grow a bunch of bugs, and we take out the nutrients and all the things that are dissolved in the wastewater. And we have aeration basins. What we're able to do with densification is keep the footprint of that aeration basin and make it work better. So we are in the process of piloting a project at Rock Creek that would allow us to get about 25% more capacity out of an aeration basin that you can currently get. One of the things we like about this is it's fast, and it's that just-in-time thing gets a lot easier because it's a very small-scale project. It's an add-on appendage. We've presented a lot, and we've developed methods to really, we put fats, oils, and grease in our digester at Durham. We get about $1 million a year in tipping fees for doing that. We create a lot of power. No one's really known how much you can put into the digester without, it's a biological process. And if you lose your digester biology, it's very difficult to get it back. And so how much can you push that loading? So by looking at to understanding the different types of things we can bring in and making sure they're the best bang for the buck for that tipping fee we have, and also being able to add more fog, we are able to add a lot more fog than what is typically recognized in the industry as what you can safely do with your digester. So 30% more fog, 30% more revenue, plus more power is another good example of where the R&I team, I think, has done some great work for us. And I wanted to point out, it is a lot about developing the CIP and helping the process folks and getting through startup and back to, yes, it's not research in the typical sense. It's a very applied type of group of folks that work in process areas. And then the last bullet is reducing operational risks. We've been asked to participate with a few other utilities on a project. There's a large pool of NSF grant money, and we're excited to talk to everyone about this. But it's that kind of recognition in the industry. It's about a $2 million pool of money that we can get involved with for very limited funds, about $100,000 for ourselves. It's AI. It's how do we drive AI to help our business. And we've already done some work with these folks. So that's another example. Why is it important to get out and be recognized? It's these types of opportunities that it opens up for us. Yes.
Elaine?
NSF has been decimated. Is that secure funding?
That's a great question. I did get ready for that one because I knew it would come. So this is actually what even more it's a small business in Oregon that has this grant that we've been working with for years. And he reached out to us because he wanted to work with some of our folks, knowing that the work that we've been doing. And so because it's a small business type of grant, he's optimistic that he's going to be safe. It isn't the type of grant, some of the things are very obvious targets. It's not falling under that category. It's falling under a better. But he also has other folks that are willing to step in with venture capital money even if it got to that point. That's not where we're at today. But, yeah, good question.
So, sorry.
Ramesh?
Maybe a rhetorical question, but when you said 29 to 40% of FOG,
yes,
is that something that's related to recycling or waste management rather than getting into the sewers?
exactly, correct, yeah. So, and keeping the fat soil, it used to, at times and historically, was going down the pipelines, clogging up, causing SSOs, causing lots of problems. So there are programs that require these grease traps and so forth to get pumped out now. And then the issue had been, well, what do you do with all of that material? So it's jet fuel for us to put into our digester and create gas. And when I say 20 to 40%, so we already have to treat our own biosolids. We call that indigenous solids. I don't know. Probably, maybe that's not a PC term anymore. But that's what we did. That's our base loading of the solids we produce in treatment. So then how much more can you add to your process? And we're finding that it's quite a bit higher than what we thought. But you're correct in how you characterized it is 100% correct.
Because where I was going with that is that awareness, education, or motivation a better way rather than spend additional money in just, at least on the CWS side, to digest it or dispose it of in another way? Is this something that can be pushed on to the customers who are generating these and adding it into our sewer?
I think, and Ryan or Diane could, that it's regulated enough in the metro area that they have to collect this material. There's a preferred pumper type of deal. So the education, I think, as far as the type of material that we can get, I think is there, and there's more of it than we can even take in. So that it's not so much, in my mind, an issue of getting that material collected. It's there, the demand is there for it. Does that help? I'm not sure I'm 100%, yeah.
No, that's why I call it a rhetorical question, because from what you're saying, I understand that it's really the quantity, not the behavior or the usage part of it, right?
For the fats, oils, and grease, it's more about the quantity. At Rock Creek, there's a lot of other materials that you could bring into a digester beyond fats, oils, and grease. So that's the other part of the work we're doing is different industries, and our pre-treatment folks talk to industries, and we're trying to, industrial symbiosis is, I think, the term that's being thrown around now. What we want to do is work with those industries for the next level, beyond fats, oils, and grease, of what can we take that is a waste for you, and it's a value to us, and it saves you money, and it generates revenue for us. And so that is an ongoing thing that We've done some of that at Rock Creek with a kombucha company, but there's a lot more of those opportunities that are out there. And as we grow our ability to use the gas at Rock Creek, that's the next piece of it.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other? Okay. That is my presentation. If there's any other questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you, Rick.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, still a little bit ahead of schedule. At this point, we will break for lunch and reconvene at 12:30.
Do we have an announcement about the availability of lunch?
Lunch is available.
And where my, oh, is that out?
We're just getting names on orders to be able to make sure people get what they requested.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You got it.
Details.
Mission Control.